presentation is on Chapter 4 and Learner Differences, which cover four basic subjects. Intelligence in everyone, just how we view intelligence, students that are on the high end of achievement, what some people call gifted students, those with disabilities, or rather disabilities encompassing physical stuff, mental stuff, and emotional and behavioral things as well. And then finally, exceptional education, which is just a broad way of saying how we educate those who don't learn in the traditional way. Pretty much just those with either disabilities or who achieve great things, those high achievement students. So the first category is intelligence, and is probably the one you guys know the most about because we did that paper on intelligence. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown of it, but basically, it is one of the most important parts of this chapter because it does apply to everyone who will end up teaching. How we view intelligence is going to be a pretty integral part of how we teach and why we teach the way we do. But there are pretty much four main ways of viewing it at the moment. There's the traditional just general intelligence, which was developed in, I think, 1904 by Spearman, and that's referred to as G, Spearman's G, just general intelligence, basically saying that we may do better or worse at individual abilities and tests, but it is all influenced by one definable trait that is intelligence, and that's the G he's referring to. Then there's the theory of fluid and crystallized intelligence. There's multiple intelligences, and then the latest big theory is the triarchic theory of intelligence. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that, but yeah. So Spearman was the first one to take a crack at intelligence with general intelligence, and that was the most commonly held view of it for a pretty long time. And then came the theory of fluid and crystallized intelligence, which so basically fluid intelligence encompasses our ability to think, to reason logically, and how our brain functions. How efficiently we can process things, and then that plays into crystallized intelligence, which is our ability to take that fluid intelligence and basically apply it to different scenarios. So whereas fluid intelligence is set from a fairly young age, or I wouldn't say set, but is trained and can be viewed pretty accurately from a young age, crystallized intelligence will grow as we get older because our memories and our experiences will all add to our ability to place the information and the things we've learned, the skills we've learned, into a specific cultural context. So fluid intelligence is set, while crystallized intelligence is not. And I guess I shouldn't say fluid intelligence is set, because that implies that we can't get smarter, which is something I really want to stay away from. I don't want to say that, but it is harder to change than crystallized intelligence, or changes less drastically. So then there's Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and that at the moment is probably the most commonly held belief, or something similar to it at least, the idea that we can't be defined by one real G, one or two basic characteristics, like Spearman's G or fluid and crystallized intelligence, but rather that we all perform with different levels of ability in different areas. So Gardner said that there were basically 8 categories of intelligence. There was linguistic, musical, spatial, which is our ability to visualize and to physically interact with things, or imagine ourselves physically interacting with things in our mind. Then there's logical, mathematical, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. And you should note the naturalist one was added later. It was actually suggested by someone else, and then Gardner, after hearing about it, kind of accepted it and said, "Yeah, okay, that fits into what I was saying." There are other categories, like spiritual intelligences that have been suggested that Gardner didn't really approve of or is hesitant to accept. That's not to say that they're not real or whatever, but just that he didn't agree with them. And then finally, the newest theory is the triarchic theory that says that everyone has three important cognitive processes. There's our ability to analyze, analytics, creativity, and then practicality. So analytics is basically our perception, how we are able to organize and generate and take in information, basically. Then creativity is our ability to generate new ideas with that information, basically just to create something out of it, rather than just taking in the information. And then the practical intelligence is the third part, and that is our ability to use that information that we either take in or generate for a real world purpose, basically our ability to apply the info. And so these three processes are all equally important when you look at your whole life, but within any one task, one of these processes may be emphasized more. So for instance, in writing a paper, analytics and creativity might take more emphasis than practicality, because, like, for a research paper, for instance, it's all about being able to take in information and then generate ideas through it, and we're not so much applying it to the real world, and if we are, it's just theoretical. It's saying this is what you could do with that. But yeah, and one important thing to mention here is that is learning styles, and a lot of times people associate learning styles with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, and while they are similar, they're not the same. Basically, learning styles are how we approach learning, and so oftentimes people will approach something more visually, or that's just how they learn better. Or for instance, like, they may learn best by thinking about it through music, and music is one of Gardner's intelligences, but the key point is that they don't all match up perfectly. They're not exactly the same thing. They're related, but it's important not to interchange the two terms of learning styles and multiple intelligences. And so while it is important to learn about the different learning styles, because, well, just personally, I think it is very relevant to how we teach and how we change our teaching for each individual student in classroom and whatnot. It is important to realize that there's not really any empirical evidence to say that there are these different learning styles. There's not a lot of research to back it up, and so it's important not to rely solely on that. But personally, I'd be extremely surprised if we didn't all have learning styles. It seems kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, why else would some people do great on certain assignments and terrible on others, and the other person who gets the exact same grade at the end of the class might do great on the assignment that the first person did terrible at, and terrible on the assignment that the first person did great at. It just it's obvious to me that we don't all think the same, and so it doesn't seem logical that we would all learn the same either. So from these different ways of viewing intelligence, we move on to IQ testing, which is something that's really important to understand, because a improper view of it can really do a lot of damage to our students. So basically, IQ testing is just trying to measure someone's IQ. I don't necessarily agree with trying to categorize people by intelligence. It's definitely something that will be a part of our teaching careers for those of us who do go on to teach. So it's important to realize how it can be used effectively, the benefits it has, as well as the drawbacks. And so one of those benefits is that it generally does fairly accurately predict student success. Someone who scores really high on an IQ test is probably going to do fairly well in school. And for the most part, those who score low are probably not going to do great in school. It does correlate very well with the school experience. It's important to remember, though, that doing well in school or doing poorly in school doesn't necessarily mean that you are smart or unintelligent. It just means that you are good at doing those tasks that we teach in school. A couple of the drawbacks to keep in mind are that some people do really bad on tests. They have test anxiety, and so they may do just really bad on this IQ test and have it translate poorly, and make their teachers or others think that they're just not very smart, and create some problems for them. Another thing to realize is that it ignores most types of intelligence. It caters primarily to mathematical, logical types of intelligence, as well as linguistics. And so, basically the modern IQ test was based off Spearman's G. And so, if you value the other types of intelligence, if you think that they exist, then it's important to remember that the modern IQ test doesn't really test for those other ones, very much at least. The other thing is that it does end up labeling you, or labeling the person who takes the test, which is, I think, it can be good, but oftentimes it can be more harmful than beneficial. And finally, and I think the biggest thing, is that there's a huge cultural bias with it. So it's been shown through a lot of research that those who take these IQ tests, who are from other cultures, do significantly worse on them than the people who are from the same culture, which is a big problem because, obviously we don't believe that other cultures are dumber than us, or I hope we don't. I certainly don't. And if we believe that all cultures, just in terms of their raw intelligence, are equal, yet people from other cultures taking a Canadian or an American IQ test, if they're doing significantly worse on them on average, that means that there's a problem there. It's making these people from other cultures out to be less intelligent, which we need to be really careful with. However, it's not all bad. It is good for getting a general average of how well someone's going to do within the school system with just the regular amount of support, and that's key. If they're going through like the average classroom experience, it is a good test of that. Some things to keep in mind about it: the IQ score itself is relative. So a score of 100 is average. That means 50% of the people around you are going to score higher and 50% lower. And then someone who scores 115, that means that about 15% of the people taking the test are going to do better. Someone at 85, an IQ of 85, it means that about 15% of the people taking the test are going to do worse. And then also you can take it individually, which is much more accurate, because generally it's all oral and you have like a trained psychologist there to help you with it. Or you can take it in groups. And then finally, the Flynn effect is something to keep in mind. Basically, the Flynn effect is that we are getting smarter. We're getting better at the test as time goes on. And there's not really one main view as to why that is. There are a number of theories, but it's still kind of a mystery. And so, that can suggest two things: either that we really are getting smarter, that society is getting smarter and smarter, or just that there's a problem with the test that we haven't quite worked out.